Look at a honeybee for a second. Its brain is smaller than a grass seed, fewer than 1 million neurons, packed into a structure you could barely see without magnification. By comparison, your own brain holds roughly 86 billion, and yet, somehow, that tiny buzzing insect can count. Not metaphorically, actually count, distinguish 2 flowers from 3, track a specific number of landmarks on the way home, even solve basic arithmetic in laboratory conditions designed to test exactly that. How does something with a brain, that small pull-off math that most people assume requires a much larger nervous system? For a long time, counting was assumed to be a distinctly human trick, maybe shared with a handful of especially clever animals, primates, dolphins, certain birds. Insects weren't supposed to be on that list at all. Their brains simply seemed too small, too simple, too limited in raw processing power. Then researchers started actually testing them properly. One of the clearest demonstrations came from experiments where bees were trained to fly through a short tunnel marked with a specific number of landmark shapes before finding a sugar reward. Researchers, including cognitive scientist Lars Chittka at Queen Mary University of London, ran variations of this setup repeatedly, and the bees consistently learned to count the landmarks correctly, reliably choosing the correct number of markers to locate their reward, even when the landmarks themselves changed shape, size, and color between trials. That last detail matters enormously. If bees were simply memorizing a specific visual pattern, changing the landmarks entirely should have thrown them off completely. It didn't. The bees weren't remembering a picture. They were tracking an actual quantity, abstracted away from what the objects even looked like. Further studies pushed this further. Bees have been shown to reliably distinguish quantities up to around 4 or 5 items with real accuracy. Beyond that range, performance drops off sharply, which is itself an interesting clue. Human infants, before they learn formal counting, show remarkably similar limits, reliably distinguishing 1, 2, 3, and 4 objects at a glance, but struggling noticeably beyond that without actually counting step by step. Bees appear to be running on strikingly similar low-level numerical machinery, despite having evolved on a completely separate branch of the animal family tree, separated from us by hundreds of millions of years. So, how does a brain this size actually manage it? Researchers believe bees aren't running some miniature version of human arithmetic. Instead, their tiny nervous systems appear to rely on efficient, specialized shortcuts, neural circuits, fine-tuned specifically for rapid quantity estimation rather than general-purpose counting. It's less like doing math on a calculator and more like a kind of instant, built-in gut sense for how many things are present, wired directly into perception itself. Here's where the story takes its strangest turn. In 2018, researcher Scarlett working with Adrian Dyer at RMIT University in Melbourne, ran an experiment specifically testing something far more abstract than simple counting, whether bees could grasp the concept of zero. Not just recognizing few versus many, but understanding nothing as a genuine, meaningful value on a numerical scale, a concept so abstract that human children typically don't fully grasp it until several years into their own mathematical development. The bees were trained to consistently choose the image containing fewer items between 2 options. Then, researchers introduced a genuinely blank image containing 0 items against a card showing actual items, and the bees remarkably treated the empty image as though it represented an even smaller quantity than 1. They ranked nothing as less than something. This should genuinely surprise you. Understanding 0 isn't simply about recognizing an absence of objects. It requires representing the complete lack of something as an actual value that fits meaningfully into a broader numerical scale. That's a serious leap in abstraction, one that took human mathematical systems thousands of years to formally develop and standardize. A creature with a brain smaller than a grass seed appears to be doing something conceptually related, using neural hardware that looks nothing at all like ours. Why would a bee's brain evolve this kind of capability in the first place? The most likely answer connects directly back to survival. Bees rely heavily on tracking landmarks to navigate efficiently between their hive and specific flower patches, sometimes over surprisingly long distances. Quickly estimating quantities, whether that means counting visual landmarks along a flight path or judging how many flowers remain worth visiting in a given patch, could offer a genuine survival advantage. Evolution doesn't necessarily require an elaborate general intelligence to solve a specific, repeated problem. It just needs a shortcut that reliably works, tuned specifically to the challenges that species actually faces. So the next time you wave away a bee buzzing near a flower bed, remember what's actually happening inside that impossibly small head. A nervous system with a fraction of your neuron count, somehow performing a version of numerical reasoning scientists once assumed required a considerably larger, more complex brain. Intelligence, it turns out, was never strictly about how much brain tissue you happen to have. Sometimes, it's about how efficiently a small handful of neurons can be wired to solve exactly the problem that matters most.